Hi, everybody. Welcome back to My Favorite Mistake. I'm Mark Raven. Our guest today is Shirley Novack. She's the owner and an interior designer at her firm, Novack and Associates. She originally graduated with a degree in laboratory science, but after marrying and having three children, she went back to school and has now run her successful interior design business for almost 40 years. She describes herself as a first-generation daughter of Polish and Russian parents. She recently published her first book, a historical fiction novel called The Story of, and it's a book she says is loosely based on the life of her father, a Russian immigrant. So we will talk about that. A lot of things to discuss here today. Shirley, thanks for being here. How are you?
Thank you. I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you're here.
Thank
There's a
you.
lot to talk about, but as we always do here, and as you shared in initial messages back and forth, you're aware of mistakes. It sounds like you're not shy to talk about them. But the question we always start off with here is this: what's your favorite mistake?
You know what? My favorite mistake has to do with being in the wrong place at the right time. And I say the right time because if I can get a story out of something, it doesn't matter what I have to go through, as long as it produces a good story.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a good story.
Yeah.
As an interior designer, I had to go meet an airplane at Logan Airport in Boston to pick up a coffee table. Now, this was in the cargo area of Logan Airport where I had never been. It's like off in no man's land. So I get there and the plane lands at 5:30 and the table was not on it. I was told come back at 7:30, it will be on that plane.
Mm.
So I go to leave the airport. I said, I'll go have dinner at the terminal and I'll come back at 7:30. As I go to leave the terminal, I really don't even know how to get out of there because, as I said, it's off somewhere in the distance.
Yeah.
Suddenly, I'm stopped by a state trooper who holds up his hand. And as I'm stopped, a whole entourage goes by of limousines and black vans, and then a big limousine with the American flag on it. And I figured, well, they know where they're going. I don't know where I'm going. So I'll follow them.
Yeah.
So I fell in line behind them. And all of a sudden, they come to an abrupt stop. And I look up and I'm at the end of a private runway.
Yeah.
Air Force Two is on the runway. And I am surrounded by Secret Service agents.
Yeah.
And they're calling in my license plate. Now, I am in a van with tinted windows.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
So I'm trying to explain to them, hey, I'm just an interior designer, leave me alone. And I go to back up, but I can't. Every time I try to back up, my car stalls.
Mm.
And they keep me there. And they were wearing dark glasses and they were calling in my license plate. And I couldn't leave.
Right.
Finally, the plane takes off and they all go into a building. And I'm able to leave. My car backs up. So I went into the service station at the airport and I tell the serviceman what happened. And he said, he checks out my car and he says, there's nothing wrong with your car. He said, but do you have a cell phone?
Huh.
And in those days, I did have a cell phone, but it was hardwired into my car.
Mm-hmm.
And he said to me, I'll bet you anything it's dead. Sure enough, the cell phone was dead. And he said, no, he said, there's nothing wrong with your car, but they have a device where they can stop you from leaving if you're in a stop position. But if you had to be moving, they couldn't have prevented you from leaving. But they were preventing me from leaving.
They disabled the van, he
said. They disabled the van. And I thought, wow, now I'm a known terrorist.
But okay, have you been able to fly since? You describe eating in the terminal. This was clearly before 9/11 for you to be able to.
This was we were in the middle of Desert Storm.
Okay.
It turned out that Colin Powell had been speaking at Harvard's commencement that day.
Oh.
And he was in the limousine and he was getting on the airplane. Right. And they clearly thought that I was going to blow it up. Yeesh. But if you think this is the only time I've been suspected of being a terrorist, not so. Not so. A few years ago, I went to Italy and I had a medication that had to be on ice. And I called the airline first and I said, look, I'm traveling with ice packs. Is that going to be okay? Yeah, no
Mhm.
problem. So I get to the terminal, and again, everything goes through the security, and suddenly they stop, and I'm surrounded by TSA agents.
Yeah.
This is becoming, my life. Um, they when they looked at the ice pack through the screener, it looked like they were wires, but it was actually folds in the ice.
Hmm.
And they were convinced there was a bomb in there.
Oh gosh.
So they called the bomb squad, and they took me over to a little area of the
I,
of the
I was
terminal,
going to guess. I'm picturing, yes. It always sounds like it's like, yeah, there's some little room,
a little room. and
windowless
and
room.
and the funny thing is I know I'm not doing anything wrong, but
Right.
they don't,
Right.
because I look like a terrorist. And as they're very, very gingerly trying to open up this little blue bag, I was so tempted to just go, boom, but I
No,
didn't.
no, 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 no.
No,
That
no,
would be
no,
a
no, no.
mistake that maybe sent you to jail.
Yeah, that would, but I didn't do it because although I'm juvenile, I'm not that
I'm
juvenile.
glad you didn't. I'm glad you didn't do that.
I
Yeah.
know, and they
Yeah.
were
Yeah.
so apologetic. They really were
Well,
very nice. But I said, hey, I'd rather be safe than sorry.
sure.
So
I
that
mean,
was another good mistake I
I
made.
mean,
But
what interesting stories. I mean, you want TSA to find something that might look suspicious and check it out. That's more reassuring than something that slips through. I mean,
right,
TSA, I mean, this is, the difficulty of that job. Like, there are different studies where TSA or the Government Accountability Office or whatever will intentionally test. Like, they will put through they will put it through a gun or a suspicious looking item to see if it gets caught. And I know the failure rate I've read is very high of them not catching things. So it's good that they did. I'm glad they didn't
oh
rough you
yeah,
up or put you in jail.
oh yeah, and it was another good story. So
Well, so now back to, I mean, an encounter with Secret Service. I mean, did how were you inconvenienced or feeling scared? Like, were they sort of threatening, or you're just not
they wouldn't speak to me.
they wouldn't? Wow,
They
that's maybe
wouldn't
even
speak to
more
me.
troubling than if they yelled at you. What are you doing? Right?
Yeah, no, they were calling in my license plate, checking out who I was. And I opened my window and I'm trying to wave at them and say, hey, look at, this is a mistake. I shouldn't
Mhm.
have followed you. But
Right. Yeah, I mean, with the way you were describing at first, black vehicle, something with a flag, and I'm like, oh, that was a motorcade. Like, I mean,
yeah,
I realized where um, this was heading. Oh gosh, wow.
but oddly enough, I wasn't afraid because I knew I hadn't done anything wrong.
Sure.
But um, it was when I came home that night, I looked at my husband and I said, wow, have I got a story for
Yeah.
you? So
So lesson learned is, yeah, if you see something that looks like a motorcade, just keep your distance.
keep your
Don't
distance.
try following.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But and then again, the table was not on the plane at 7:30 either. So,
Of course.
you know, part of the
Oh,
business.
wow. So
Yeah.
speaking of that business, so Shirley, I'm curious, as it says in your bio, you started off thinking about laboratory medicine and laboratory science. Like, I mean, this would have been like working in a hospital or in a laboratory.
Yeah, I was actually a surgical assistant for the first research team that operated on the unborn. We were the pioneers
Mm,
in fetal surgery, and that was at Boston University Medical Center.
wow.
And it was, I had only had an associate's degree, but they wanted someone with a master's degree.
Mhm.
And they hired me because they said my enthusiasm was overwhelming and they had to hire me. And they actually sent me up to the University of Rochester Medical School to take a crash course in hematology.
Yeah. Yep.
And it was the most amazing experience working with them. And then, federal funding kept getting cut. So the research kept getting cut. And lo and behold, so then I ended up teaching instead.
And then was that part of your pathway? Then I was going to ask, Did you consider getting that degree a mistake, or going into healthcare? Like, was that a mistake? You clearly left healthcare. I'm curious what happened.
Well, I ended up teaching the medical assisting program at a medical assisting school, at a school in Boston.
Yeah.
And that was probably my favorite thing in the whole world to do. I love teaching. But then I started having children, and
Yeah.
and that was it. You know, I was a stay-at-home mom
Mhm.
for a while. And then I hired two interior designers to work for me. And long story short, they ended up hiring me
Ah.
part-time, you know.
Was
So
this enthusiasm again? They were impressed
my
with Shirley
enthusiasm, yeah,
Novack
because I would go
enthusiasm?
into their showroom and I would see what other people were doing, and I'd say, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" But I left them after 3 years, and I had a following, and I said, "Well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it the right way."
Mm.
And so I went back to school, and I took one course a semester for 9 years,
Wow.
and I got my degree in design. But at that point, I was already established.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I was pretty well known in the Boston area.
Mhm.
I did show houses and all that other stuff, so no one knew I hadn't graduated yet.
Yeah.
But
You could get the job done.
I got the job done, and in fact, my graduation was the same day as my daughter's. So of course,
Yeah.
I wasn't even going to go to mine anyway, but she
Yeah.
took precedent.
Yeah. So, Shirley, you had said in initial messages back and forth, you said you're still running your design practice, trying to keep from making any more mistakes. So, I was going to ask, like, do you have any methods that you use to try to prevent mistakes? Or is it more a
Impossible.
matter of learning from them? You say it's impossible. Tell me.
Impossible. I'm still making mistakes.
Yeah.
There's no way, because number one, technology has changed so much.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not as computer literate as I would like to be. However, I'm still doing floor plans the same old way with, tracing paper and a pencil, and I can't do it on the screen. It just doesn't make sense to me. But I'm semi-retired at this point.
Okay.
I'm only keeping a couple of my favorite clients, and they keep me busy.
Yeah.
And now I'm writing books.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so we can talk about the book here in a minute. The book again, Shirley Novack, our guest today, is the author of a novel called "The Story of," ... I guess that's part of the title, and
Yeah.
we'll hear more in a minute of what that story is. But there was one other thing you said in the message that I thought was worth exploring here. I'm just going to read it for everybody. That you said, making mistakes is human, as long as I'm not the surgeon operating on the wrong appendage. Just reference back. Sadly, that does happen. For anyone who hasn't heard, episode 79, Dr. David Mayer was not a surgeon who directly made that mistake, but he was a young anesthesiologist in the room when a surgeon cut into the wrong, incorrect side
Oh no.
of a patient. That is a big oh no. And it's in situations like that where we have to take the most care to prevent mistakes. Like what's the kind of mistake you might make? It's not life or death, no offense to interior design, right? If you pick the wrong color, or
Well, the client doesn't know that. They think it is life and death. They think if their furniture isn't in by a particular date, it's my fault. And with the supply chain being the way it is these days, it's brutal.
Yeah.
But probably the most expensive mistake I made was when my clients would move out of state, they would take me with them. And I had a client who moved to Seattle. And so you just can't go back and check your measurements.
That easily. Yeah.
And we had a piece of furniture custom made for them that was mega thousands of dollars. And I read my numbers wrong. And I ate it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You hadn't measured wrong? Did you measure wrong, or you somehow, like, when you say read it wrong, what happened?
I transposed my figures. I transposed what I was reading incorrectly.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Wow.
So I measured 10 times and cut once. Now.
Now, right. So learning from that, that was, an expensive mistake like that will certainly prompt a lot of learning and prevention for sure.
Yeah, but basically, paint can be changed.
Yeah.
It's just when you have things that are custom made. Another time, I ordered a piece of furniture custom made from the West Coast for someone in Boston, and the house was being built. All my measurements were correct. However, when the furniture came in, all the moldings had already been put up, and I needed about an inch more to make a turn. And they wouldn't allow me to take the molding off to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, 3 a.m., I pop up out of bed and I said, I've got the solution.
Yeah.
Because this was another very expensive piece I was going to eat. And I decided, well, the carpeting hasn't gone down yet. The flooring hadn't gone down yet. So we pulled the piece up from the basement through the floorboards.
Yeah.
And I had to hire like 6 people to do that, but it was a lot less money, than eating that piece of furniture.
Yeah. Well, so with that piece of custom furniture, did you find another home for it, or was it so?
Oh no, we pulled it up through the floorboards.
No, I'm saying, but was this 2 separate stories? Maybe
No, one story. One story.
You did figure out how to make it work. Gotcha.
Yeah, at 3 o'clock in the morning, I jumped out of bed and I said, I've got the solution. We'll pull it up through the floor. Because we just couldn't make that turn to get it into the bedroom.
Yeah.
And they recently sold the house. And the piece went with it. I mean, there was no way to get it.
Yeah.
Whoever bought the house got that piece with it.
Well, okay. So you figured it out, but it was still something to learn from, to not create the risk of that.
Absolutely.
Of that loss. Gotcha.
I never did that again. I never. But still, if you're good at what you do and you really care about your clients, you get up at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
With a nightmare, like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Yeah. And so right now I'm only working with the people that I've worked with for like 20 years, and no new mistakes, old mistakes.
Yeah. So as the that's good. As owner of the firm, I'm curious, like how did you try to handle situations when an employee of yours made a mistake?
I fired her. I've only, I had an office manager for 20 years who made a major mistake.
What happened?
And she had made a lot of little mistakes, and her answer was always, oh well. This was a major mistake. And I wasn't going to take "oh well."
Yeah.
And I fired her. But that was the only time I ever fired anyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh no, I once fired a painter. My client came home and found him playing pool.
Well,
in her house.
Sounds like a bad decision on the painter's part.
But I'm pretty easy to get along with, and
sure.
Unless you really screw up badly.
Yeah.
I allow parameters.
Sure. I'm sure there's some cases where you can try to help someone learn and not repeat it, but maybe something like choosing to play pool in a client's house is just such bad judgment. You're like, okay, I cannot take that risk.
Anymore.
No. Right.
I'm only as good as the people that work for me.
Yeah.
Or the people I refer.
Yeah.
And I have had a celebrity clientele, which is very alluring to some people, especially when they're athletes. And I would come in and find my guy sitting at a table looking at a playbook.
Yeah. Like right. Bad judgment.
Yeah.
Yeesh. Okay, so one last question around interior design, and then we'll talk about your book. It sounds fascinating. I'm trying to think how to ask it. Like interior design mistakes that a client might really be driving. Like they have some idea, and every ounce in your body says that's a mistake. That's a design mistake. How do you have to just? Is the customer always right? How do you handle that?
No, I won't do it. I mean, I don't have a style that's mine.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I try to find out what the client is looking for and just steer them in the right direction and keep them from making mistakes. if they're adamant, if they're totally adamant about doing something that I disagree with, I won't do it.
Yeah.
I'll say go somewhere else because it's wrong. You're going to be unhappy, and it's not going to work. Because in the end, I'm the one that gets blamed for anything.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Wow.
I mean, you know, people will say to me, "Oh, you're so lucky. It's such a great profession. You get to make everything pretty." And I'm like, "No, no, no, no,
Yeah.
no. The liability is unbelievable.
Yeah.
You know, you have to know what is a retaining wall, what is, where to put windows, what I have one thing that does work in my favor, and I may have mentioned this. I'm a synesthete. I have synesthesis.
You did not mention that.
Oh, okay. I'm a synesthete, which means that I can just, well, this is only part of it. Basically, it means that when I see numbers and colors and shapes and sizes, my senses are crossed.
Oh.
So I see them all as one. So like number 6 is soft, number 6 is blue. But the other good part of this is that I can look at a room and instantly know what size to put where, what. I can just picture the whole thing together. And that's part of what I do. And I'm very fortunate in that respect.
Yeah. Huh.
But
well,
I'm sorry, what?
Well, I was going to ask about the book.
Okay.
The story of, you say, loosely, historical fiction, loosely based on your father. What inspired you? Tell us about the book.
I always had a book in me, but I never thought of writing until the pandemic hit. Anyhow, my father was born in 1904, Koretz, Poland. And what makes the reason that there are 3 dots after the title is because so many immigrants came over from Eastern Europe at the beginning of the 20th century. They all have stories. So it's like the story of anyone, everyone. It's, dot, dot, dot.
Right.
My father's mother died when he was 12 years old. And his father, who was a tyrant, a horrible, miserable man, sent he and his 9-year-old brother to live in the care of a brothel. And he said, I'm going to America and I will send for you when I get enough money. So my father lived in the brothel for 3 years.
Wow.
And during that time, he was raped by a Polish soldier.
Oh, okay. Shoot. Crap. Sorry.
Okay.
That went from wow to terrible really quickly. Sorry.
But that part of the book is true.
Oh.
And so I had a lot of meat to begin with. I tried to make it nonfiction, but it just wasn't interesting enough.
Yeah. This was something your father was willing and able to talk about? And it's
no, I didn't find out about that till after he passed away.
Oh. Okay.
It was a family secret.
Oh, okay. Well, understandably so. Yeah.
But using that as the baseline for my story, my father does end up in America. There's a love story involved that's fiction. And the Polish soldier comes back into his life in America. And revenge is the word.
Right.
That's fiction.
Yeah. All right. I'm picturing, it sounds like there's an opportunity to sell movie rights.
Well, that's what I want. Anyone out there who wants to produce this, it's gotten great reviews.
Yeah.
It really has. I sent the book to one publishing company. They were a hybrid publishing company. And they said, we'll call you in a few weeks, and they called me in 3 days. And they said, we want to sign you.
Wow.
And it's gotten mostly 5-star reviews. It's been such a labor of love. And I'm loving this. Look I'm here talking to you.
Your enthusiasm for writing and your enthusiasm for your book now.
Yeah, my enthusiasm, every morning I get up and I'm enthusiastic.
Yeah.
It's life is to be lived.
Yeah.
And I don't know what I'm going to do in my next career, but I'm not done.
Yeah. Well, I normally would ask more questions about the book, but since it's a novel and we don't want to give away too much, we'll encourage people to go check the book out. I'll put links in the show notes to where
Thank you.
people can learn more. But one quick question for people who might not know, what do you tell us what you mean by hybrid publisher? This might help people who are looking to write and they're trying to figure out what to do.
Okay, well, being my first book and no one knows who I am, I couldn't just simply send it to Random House or Simon and Schuster, but I did not want to self-publish.
Mm-hmm.
I did my due diligence and I researched, and I found out that a hybrid publishing company is one that they take a little money at the beginning to sign you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how all hybrid publishers work, but this was the Fulton Press.
Yeah.
And they do everything from soup to nuts.
Mm-hmm.
They do the whole 9 yards, and they charge you a little money up front. And to me, it seemed
Right.
like very little for what I got in return.
Yeah.
And then they don't take a dime until you've
Yep.
made that back.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So you basically have nothing to lose.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's something to be said for getting help and assistance. Even quote unquote self-publishing, it's a bit of a mistake to call it that, because if you're really doing it all yourself, I mean, odds are that the same person who can write can also edit and do a cover and proofread and do all the things that are required for the launch of a book. So yeah, we can find people to help, and the hybrid publisher seems more like hiring a general contractor.
Yeah.
If you were building a house, as opposed to being the general like when I'm doing books, I'm basically the general contractor hiring different contractors then to work with me. Some people don't have the time or the interest in doing that. So it is interesting to see how different models for help and different business models are out there.
I will say, I did design the cover, and my understanding from other people is that no publisher will let you do that.
Mm-hmm.
Most publishers will not let you do that.
Yeah.
But I had a very definite picture in my head of what
Mm-hmm.
I wanted the cover to look like,
Yeah.
and they allowed me to do that.
Yeah.
They read my mind. I also had to approve every second that went into this book.
Yeah.
So they could not, like, they would make certain suggestions, regarding grammar, and if I didn't want to change, they wouldn't change it.
Right. Yep. It's your book. And yeah, I mean, I've done books previously through a publisher where there's always risk of disagreement around the cover, the title, the length of the book, the pricing. I mean, I think one advantage of whether you're quote unquote self-publishing or through a hybrid publisher is that you can maintain creative control, business control. They might be advising you the way you advise your interior design clients. They might say, Shirley, I think this is a mistake. But ultimately, like you said, it's your vision, it's your product, it's your name, right? It's your family.
Right. The interesting thing also, and I'm going to put this out there if anybody knows the answer to this question. When I was in the 4th grade, I had a teacher. His name was Mr. Willett, John Willett, in Boston. And he gave us an assignment to write a poem about spring. And he was so impressed by my poem, he made me read it to the entire school. And he took me aside afterwards and he said to me, "Don't ever stop writing. You are going to be a great writer one day." And so the only acknowledgement in this book is to Mr. Willett. Now, when I was in the 4th grade, we were his first class out of college. So it's conceivable that he's still alive.
Mm-hmm.
But if he's not alive, he must have family that is. And I've gone into the Boston School Department records. I've tried to locate him, but it doesn't go back that far because I was born in the Stone Age. And, they just don't have anything on him. So I went on Facebook trying to find Mr. Willett, and I still haven't found him. Mm-hmm. But I have had people get back to me telling me, "Hey, I was in your 4th grade class."
Yeah. So Shirley, it sounds like I hope you find the opportunity to find Mr. Willett. It sounds like you want to. If you could, face-to-face thank you, acknowledgement for that encouragement and that spark recognizing the talent that he saw in you, right?
Well, teachers are an amazing group of people. I mean, I don't think they get enough credit for their profession. And I don't think they realize that no matter how young your students might be, they can leave an impression on them that lasts for life.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was only 9 years old, and that was a few decades ago.
Yeah.
A lot of decades ago. But
Yeah.
I
Well,
never
thank
thought,
you, teachers, and thank you, Mr. Willett.
yeah.
That's powerful impact. So before we wrap up, Shirley, it sounded like you were alluding to the idea of writing again. You might not have another family story quite so compelling,
Oh
but
no, I'm into my second book.
oh, okay. You're already writing.
Yeah.
Good.
Oh yeah. I
Can you
enjoy it too much.
can you tell us a little bit about it then?
Um, well, I sort of took from the first book. The first begins with the death of the main character. Excuse me. And then it follows his children, and that's purely fiction. It's
Mhm.
purely fiction.
Okay.
But it has a lot of I like murder and mayhem and blood and guts and stuff like that. So
Yeah. Well, good luck with that. And maybe here's a final question to end on. Are there any mistakes you can think of from the writing or the production of the first book that you'll manage to not repeat this time?
um I think that because my book was written during the pandemic, and it was supposed to be released 4 months earlier than it was
Mhm.
because of supply chain shortages.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of the marketing of the book fell short.
Mm,
So I think in my next book, number one, I'm going to try to get an agent because now I can, since I've already been published.
right.
And I'm going to try to let them do the marketing and handle that.
Yeah.
But I still want a movie. I still want it.
Okay. Well, I hope that pans out for you too. So, Shirley, congratulations on that first book. I'm glad it's been well received, and I know it's all very meaningful to you. So we've covered a lot today. I mean, Shirley's encounter with the Secret Service. She survived that. She survived the TSA encounter,
Okay,
and
I can add one thing to
yeah,
that.
yeah.
I was once sitting with a mule on an airplane from Texas to Boston. My
You mean a
flying
drug mule?
a drug mule who was sitting in between me and another passenger
How did you know it was a drug mule?
because his drugs exploded in his system,
Oh,
and
yes.
he jumped over me into the aisle, and it was a pretty bad scene. So my flying experiences may be over.
Do not travel with Shirley Novack.
Don't travel with me. It's the kiss of
don't,
death.
don't go near an airport with Shirley. My gosh.
But that's 3 for 3. So
But did that person seem suspicious at all?
oh yeah, he
Oh,
he
okay.
was he was holding on to his seatbelt so tightly. And the woman next to him offered him her newspaper, and he just went, no. So he was sweating profusely.
And you might think like, oh, scared to fly, but clearly not. No, no.
He just looked strange.
Yeah.
And then all the police came on board. They had an ambulance outside, and he happened to be sitting next to me.
Yeah.
So
Well, Shirley, thank you for your stories there. Thanks for talking about, interior design mistakes and your lessons there, and talking about your book and publishing. We covered a lot. So thank you. Very, very interesting discussion. Thanks for everything you brought to the episode here.
thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It was great meeting you.
Good meeting you. Thanks, Shirley.
Thanks, Mark. Bye-bye.